Hello, everybody, and welcome to AHUSA, Alternate History, United States of America. This is a passion project that I began back in 2023 because I am a history nerd and I am also a writer. I am working on compiling a huge text of an alternate history, United States of America timeline that goes from the Declaration of Independence all the way to current day. And the best part about this project is that it is going to continue to evolve. So I have the current administration. I have the list of all of the current governors. We've got midterm elections coming up. This is being recorded in 2026. I am planning on staging all of those out. And the reason that I'm making this YouTube channel is to help compile my thoughts because I have tons of notes. I have tons of documents and papers written out with all of this history on it. This YouTube channel is more for me. If you enjoy it, then I'm so glad that you enjoy it. Thank you for watching the videos, but this is more for me to be able to go back and go, okay, I've established this, I've established this. So whenever I write the full, ultimately, textbook, novel, whatever it ends up being, I can go back and check myself. I did set a few rules for myself, though. First, the point of divergence. The USA establishes a presidency in 1776. So instead of establishing that there will be a president after the writing of the Constitution, the United States establishes that we are going to choose a figurehead after the Declaration of Independence. Some rules for myself. I must use real historical figures. I cannot create anyone fictional. Natural death dates yield natural death. So if somebody died of natural causes on a certain date, they will pass away from whatever caused that natural death on that same day as well. However, if somebody was assassinated, if somebody was killed, that doesn't mean that they are going to die on the date that they were assassinated on. John F. Kennedy is not going to die in 1963. He will continue to live, and I don't have the document in front of me right now, but I do believe that he lives into the 1990s, somewhere in there. But that also means if somebody passed away at a later time of natural death, that it is possible that they are assassinated. John Tyler is going to be a great example of that when we get into this. Some of these people were actual presidents, but some were not, but they were all real people. Butterfly effect. I started this out by going, spoiler alert, Benjamin Franklin is the first president in this timeline, and I put Benjamin Franklin up there, and I started by going, okay, what are some things that we can work through with Benjamin Franklin's possible presidency? How is he leading this new nation that's trying to establish itself through the Revolutionary War? And then everything butterfly affected from there. So it's possible that some people's political standings are different. It's probably pretty likely. Spoiler for later on as well, Franklin Delano Roosevelt does become president in this timeline. But he runs as a Republican. He runs on the same party that Theodore Roosevelt will run for president on as well. But this is all butterfly effect stuff. I'm also not judging the figure themselves. So if somebody comes off as, wow, that's a really horrible thing to do, you must really hate this person. No, this is, again, all butterfly effect stuff. That's the point of alternate history. I'm not trying to start political discourse. I'm not trying to start arguments or debates. I'm sure that there are going to be arguments and debates in the comment section. Just keep them respectful. This is all for fun. As you see that last point, have fun. This is all for fun. This is not a judgment of anyone. This is not me showing my political standings in a universe of infinite timelines. This is just one of those timelines. And the last rule, aside from have fun, was World War I and World War II must happen. They do happen right around the same times that they happen. Our entry into the war into the wars. Both of them are different, and I do believe World War II ends a little sooner than it did in the real timeline. So what this slideshow is going to be is this is going to be me showing you all of the different presidents. All the different presidents. There are 47 presidents in this timeline, same as we have in our real life timeline. But there are 55 vice presidents, so a few more than we have in the current timeline as well. Again, I hope that you have fun watching this, but this is for me to just be able to keep track of my thoughts. I'll hit some bullet points of like major events, but I am going to go back and I'm going to cover the presidencies themselves, history of this alternate history, United States of America, elections. I'm going to go through all the elections. I'm a big election nut as well, so I did plot all of this out. So other videos will go through that. I'm just going to introduce you to the world. So the first president we're going to have is Benjamin Franklin, independent from Pennsylvania. He's going to serve from January 17th, 1777 to January 17th, 1785, 8 years there. His vice president is going to be John Hancock. Major events that happen during the Franklin administration. So the Declaration of Independence is signed, and the colonists say, hey, we need a figurehead, and Benjamin Franklin's going to step up and do that. Presidential Inauguration Day is going to be his birthday, January 17th. So July 4th, 1776, the Declaration of Independence is signed, and Benjamin Franklin is chosen to be that first leader. In his absence, John Hancock would step in, but he says we're going to reconvene on my birthday in 1777, and we are going to move forward. He oversees the writing of the Constitution, establishes the government structure. This is going to be a huge thing that really affects a lot of what happens in this alternate history. There's not the House of Representatives and the Senate. Instead, it is the House of Senators and the House of Governors. So the House of Governors, you have to have served in the House of Governors in order to run for the office of president. In order to be a vice president, you either could have served in the House of Governors or in the House of Senators. There are 5 senators to start, 5 senators per state, and 1 governor. The vice president leads and oversees the House of Senators, whereas the president leads and oversees the meetings of the House of Governors. So the structure itself, the House of Senators would be like our modern day House of Representatives, whereas the House of Governors is a very much more condensed version of the current Senate. He also will establish the 50-year abolition plan. He comes out with this right before he leaves office in 1785, stating that by 1835, all of the enslaved men in this country will be free. And it establishes how exactly to reach that point. Because when they pen the Constitution, he's going to put a lot of his virtues in there. Benjamin Franklin's going to put his virtues in there, and he comes to the conclusion that the virtues cannot be held if there is slavery going on. So this is the way to get there. He also will choose John Hancock as his successor because which we can go ahead and go to the second president, John Hancock, Federalist from Massachusetts. John Hancock is going to take over as the successor, but he's going to be the first president to be elected because the first actual election is not going to take place until the 1788 year. And in this timeline, I also should say that the capital is Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So a lot of stuff is going to revolve around Benjamin Franklin, but Philadelphia, Pennsylvania is going to be the capital here. And to vote for president, people will travel to the capital to place their votes. So John Jay, for the first term of John Hancock, we're sticking to the 4-year terms, is going to be the vice president. And then John Hancock is going to change up his vice president to General George Washington. And whenever we go over the John Hancock episode, I will explain more why. The big argument that's going to happen, especially going into the first election, is do we expand the country? Do we continue moving west? Or do we focus on developing ourselves as a nation to start? And that's where we're going to see the split between the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans. So John Hancock's going to take the Federalist stance of we need to focus on national development. And then our third president, Thomas Jefferson, Democratic Republican from Virginia. He's going to serve 12 years. He is one of two people who is going to serve 3 full terms as president in this timeline. However, he is one of 4 people to be elected to 3 full terms as president. We'll get to that in a little bit. But for his first 2 terms, John Taylor of Virginia is going to be his vice president, and then for that last term, Thomas McKean is going to take over. Major events here: expansionism. He is big on expanding the country. The everyman election laws. So what this is going to do, this is something that's going to be interesting as we shape the early bits of the country here. The everyman election laws, unlike in the normal timeline where it was wealthy landowning white men that could vote in elections, it's going to be rich, poor, so long as they are white men, it does not matter. Every man, meaning rich, poor, landowning, not landowning, they are going to be covered, and that's going to be a big part of how Jefferson holds on to the presidency for 3 full terms. The Presidential Convention Act, which is how we're going to introduce ultimately what we might know as primaries, presidential primaries, where the factions and political parties will choose who's going to be the president, their presidential nominee. So each presidential nominee will choose their own vice president, but the Presidential Convention Act states that for 1 week, everyone who can will travel to the state of the sitting president, and over a 6-day period, we'll decide who their nominee is going to be, and on the final day is going to vote for the president. And then we're going to have the Burr-Hamilton essays, which is going to reveal that Thomas Jefferson may be looking to end the 50-year abolition plan of Benjamin Franklin and not see it go through, which is ultimately what helps Jefferson decide not to run for a 4th term. So we get our 4th president, DeWitt Clinton, Democratic Republican of New York. He's going to serve 1 term. John Breckinridge going to start out as his vice president. He's going to die in office, and Joseph Bradley Varnum is going to then take over the presidency. Biggest event that happens in this 4 years is the re-election bribery scandal. DeWitt Clinton's going to get caught up in a scandal when a whistleblower blows the whistle that people are being offered jobs in the government, jobs in the next term, to help get DeWitt Clinton reelected. And the thing is this is a new country, so while this may seem normal to us today, this is not normal in 1808 when that election will be going down. So our 5th president, Timothy Pickering, Federalist from Massachusetts, he's going to serve 2 terms with his vice president, John Quincy Adams. Biggest events that happen here: the Franco-Spaniard War, which is going to take place in North America, and do we get involved in that, and a power struggle with Vice President Adams. Pickering would have been president for as long as he could, but John Quincy Adams is going to pull some strings to make sure that Timothy Pickering doesn't even run for a 3rd term. So 6th, we do get John Quincy Adams, Federalist from Massachusetts as well. He is going to serve 2 terms with Vice President Rufus King by his side. Major events here: the Philadelphia marches. We're going to have a lot of Southerners coming up to the Capitol to protest John Quincy Adams being elected president. A second inauguration chaos. Sorry, that was a difficult one for me to say. Attempts on the lives of President Adams and Vice President King are going to happen. That's going to lead to Southern military policing, where the military is going to be sent into the South to basically make sure that the peace is being held, and that's going to lead to the Southern conflict. So we're starting to sow the seeds of a civil war, which is going to happen a little bit sooner than it does in our normal timeline. 7th president's going to be Andrew Jackson. He's a Democrat from Tennessee. So we're starting to split the Democratic Republicans apart here, because the Federalists are going to start to die out. Andrew Jackson, who has a really awesome story in this timeline. I can't wait to get that and break that down for you, but he's got a really awesome story to how he gets to this point. His vice president's going to be Charles A. Wickliffe. He's only going to serve 1 term here. His major events here is ending the military policing of the South and sending those troops to the West for territorial expansion, which is going to cause some conflicts with the Spanish. So after that one term, we're going to get Nehemiah R. Knight. He's going to be a Republican from Rhode Island. He's going to serve one term, 4 years there for him, with his vice president, Daniel Webster. Major events that happens here is he pulls troops back from the west, which in turn leads the Spanish into the invasion of Tennessee, which is going to be a contributing factor in re-electing Andrew Jackson for a second non-consecutive term. It is just one more term. Vice President John Tyler here. Major events are going to be territorial expansion, and as you see, that 1835 date has come up. He's going to add a 20-year expansion onto the 50-year abolition plan. Andrew Jackson is not going to be a huge fan of the plan to end slavery. We're going to put a 20-year expansion on that, and we're going to start building even more towards the Civil War. Yes, I know there are arguments in our normal timeline that, slavery wasn't the cause of the Civil War. Yes, it was. In this, there is no question slavery is the cause of the Civil War in this alternate history. Our 10th president's Thomas Ewing, Republican from Ohio. He's going to serve one term with Vice President Joseph R. Ingersoll at his sides. Major events here is he softens the anti-slavery laws, so he's going to pull back on a couple of the plans Benjamin Franklin had outlined, but he is going to cut the 20-year extension in half. So instead of 1855 being the new plan for ending slavery, it'll be 1845 under the Ewing plan. John Tyler's going to come in next. You can see he doesn't serve for a very long time. His vice president's going to be James K. Polk. Major events here. John Tyler's going to nullify the sitting abolition plan. He's saying, no, we're just going to get rid of it. I'll rip it up. And he is assassinated by a rebelling slave while visiting Vice President Polk's Tennessee plantation. That is a bloody, bloody affair. And we will break that down in the John Tyler episode. But we've got a death, so that means the vice president is going to take over. James K. Polk, Democrat from Tennessee, is going to come in. He is going to serve until 1849. His vice president is going to be Lewis Cass. A lot of stuff that happens with Lewis Cass in this timeline. Major events, the black taxes. We're going to see a lot more repression of African Americans in the United States. The execution at the presidential mansion. So the presidential mansion is in Pennsylvania, and James K. Polk is actually not going to execute the slave who killed John Tyler. He's going to execute another one of his slaves, more as a proving a point to keep everyone in line, as some people may say. And then we're going to get the Christmas extermination, another very bloody affair. 13, Daniel Webster. So former Vice President Daniel Webster, Republican from Massachusetts here. He's not going to serve for president for a long time either, and you can see his Vice President Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln, a vice president, not a president in this timeline. Major events, it's the inaugural abolition address where he says by the end of his first term, every man will be a free man. The Civil War will officially begin, and while meeting troops in Gettysburg, both President Webster and Vice President Lincoln are killed by double agents. This is a very interesting situation because laid out in the Constitution, the president serves, and if the president cannot serve, the vice president will then take over as the acting president. But there wasn't a presidential plan of succession. So what happened in that situation? We get independent from Maryland, John Joseph Abercrombie and his vice president Winfield Scott, appointed president by the Supreme Court. They halt all elections until the Civil War ends. We're going to get the end of the Civil War from President Abercrombie. We're also going to get the Military in Office Act. So in order to serve as a president, you had to have served in the House of Governors. In order to serve as a vice president, you had to have served either in the House of the Senate or House of Governors. And what President Abercrombie is going to do here is the Military in Office Act is going to say if you have achieved the rank of general in the United States military, you can also run for high office as well. We're also going to get the Presidential Succession Act. So how exactly, if we lose a president and vice president, how exactly are people going to ascend to office? And we'll go over that in the Abercrombie episode. And then we're going to begin Reconstruction, which actually takes a bit longer not too much longer, but a bit longer before it comes to an end in this timeline. After President Abercrombie, Lafayette S. Foster, Republican from Connecticut, the only other man to serve a full 3 terms. Vice President Charles Sumner is going to be by his side for the entire 12 years. Major events here: slavery is abolished. We're also going to get territorial statehood. If it was a U.S. territory, it's becoming a U.S. state. You're not going to be a territory. So we're going to get a lot of states being added into the country a lot quicker. But this is another reason that Foster's able to hold on for that long. And he established the President's Thanksgiving. It has been held by every president except for Donald Trump. Yes, Donald Trump is a president in this timeline. But the President's Thanksgiving would be the Monday before Thanksgiving. Every living former president and their spouse will come to the president's mansion to have dinner hosted by the sitting president. And it's there have been some funny stories that I've come up with this. Nothing super crazy or too serious, but there are some fun President's Thanksgiving stories that I have created, and we'll get to those. 16 is going to be Charles Sumner. He just did 12 years as vice president. He's going to do 1 term as the president here. Vice President Benjamin Wade is going to be by his side. Now, the bought and paid scandal. This is going to be something that, this is something I spent a few months trying to figure out, like the actual intricacies of it all. But bought and paid Benjamin Wade is what we'll end up getting to. Basically, the idea that Benjamin Wade was owned by different wealthier people in the country. And that's going to be what causes a lot of the infighting between him and President Sumner, and ultimately lead to Sumner not getting reelected, as well as the Homestead Convention Act. So for that week of quote-unquote primary time when we're deciding who's going to be the representative for my political party to run for president, Homestead Convention Act states that instead of traveling to the national capital, you are now going to be traveling to your state capital to cast that vote. Moving along, 17, George Henry Williams. He's going to serve 2 terms with John P. Stockton as his vice president. Major events here. You probably hear that train in the background coming from a distance, but major events here. He's going to end Reconstruction. He's also going to pass the Every Man Means Every Man bill. So what this is where we're getting voting rights for African Americans in the United States. It's not going to take until 1964-65 when Lyndon Johnson does it in our normal timeline. It's going to happen here. It's going to happen right before the 76 election. It's going to happen right before that. So it's going to be a nail biter. And then we get the stalled governance elected. Basically what happens is George Henry Williams, who is a Democrat from Oregon here, is going to preside over a House of Governors that has just the perfect number that they can't get anything done, and even President Williams can't cast that tie-breaking vote. That's how bad it is. And the stalled governance is what's going to lead to him deciding, I'm not going to run for a 3rd term. We're not going to do it. So we're going to number 18, which is Newton Booth. You see that says EM from California. That's because we get the establishment of the Everyman Party, and he's going to be elected from the Everyman Party with Vice President James Garfield by his side. Major events here: civil rights expansion. He's going to continue that expansion from the previous administration. He's also the first president to give a woman a role in the presidential advisory. So we know it as the cabinet in our timeline. It's presidential advisory in this one. But he is assassinated when leaving an event where he announces that he will run for re-election, 1884. But we've got an assassination, which means the vice president's going to take over. Also an Everyman Party man, James Garfield. He's going to choose Blanche Bruce. So we get the first non-white vice president in this timeline. He's also the first president to give non-white people roles in the presidential advisory. And as you can tell from that timeline there, he does run for his own term in 84. He does run for his own term in 84, and he does get elected. He wants to prove that he can get an African American man elected to a high office, and Blanche Bruce does stay on the ticket for that. We also get the eye for an eye bill, which says if you are found guilty of assassinating a president or a vice president, then you will receive the death penalty, no questions asked. 20, Leland Stanford, that's right. Stanford University guy is going to be our president here. He's just going to serve one term, though. Binger Herman is going to be his vice president until 91. Then Watson C. Squire is going to take over as the vice president. Major events here, the education for all is a big thing that he runs on. Rich, poor, he wants to make sure that we have an educated and a smart country, and that's going to be a great thing for his presidency. But the Beggar-Binger gold fraud scandal is going to really snipe that re-election campaign from him, especially seeing as how Binger Herman is no longer the vice president when it comes up time for re-election. President Stanford is still going to be living in the shadows of that. Moving along, 21, Grover Cleveland is going to serve one term. Arthur Pugh Gorman is going to be his vice president. Major events here, he's the first president to visit England since the Revolution. And then we get the Cleveland cheating scandal. The Cleveland cheating scandal, which is a fun one, and it was one where I had a plan in mind for how it was going to end, and it ended very differently, so I'm excited to talk about that later on. After that, we're going to get William McKinley. We're going to get William McKinley, who's elected to 2 terms with Henry Cabot Lodge as his vice president. Major events, the Natural Born Leaders Act. This states that if you were not born in the United States, you can't serve in the government of the United States. And that's something that the current administration in this timeline is dealing with. And rumors of a bot re-election. This isn't necessarily a scandal. This is just some whispering, but big thing that happens right around 1901. 23, we're getting Theodore Roosevelt elected under the Progressive Party. For this one term, 1905 to 1909. Albert Beveridge is going to be his vice president. Major events here, women's suffrage is passed, so women get the right to vote, and lots of anti-monopoly policies. Very TR. We move to 24, William Howard Taft. That says RPR because everybody knows William Howard Taft in our timeline, governor of Ohio, a man from Ohio. Was he governor? I believe. May not have been, but he was from Ohio when he was elected. Sorry, lapsed brain. But in this timeline, he's the governor of Puerto Rico because Puerto Rico is a state in this timeline. He's the governor of Puerto Rico. That is the current state he's living in when he's elected, so he is listed as a Republican of Puerto Rico. He serves one term with Henry A. DuPont as his vice president. Big thing that happens here is he repeals the anti-monopoly Roosevelt policies, which is going to play a big into the reason why he only serves one term. On top of that, we get Theodore Roosevelt back, but this time as a Republican. He wanted to just take William Howard Taft off the ticket, and he did. He's going to have Hiram Johnson as his vice president. Major events here, the Respect for Land Act. This is where we're going to establish the national parks, all that great stuff that Theodore Roosevelt really loved. You can't change that about a man. That's ingrained in him. He's going to keep fighting those monopolies. The United States is going to enter World War I, and then just like in the real timeline, he's going to die after a pulmonary embolism on January 16th, 1919, natural death. But that means Hiram Johnson is going to become the new president, serve from 1919 to 1925 with Franklin D. Roosevelt as his vice president. I told you FDR is going to be a Republican in this timeline. Major events here. This is the era of prosperity. Everybody's got money. Everybody's having a great time. We just won a war. 27, Augustus O. Stanley is going to serve 2 terms here with Sam Rayburn as his vice president. This is known as the calm before the storm in his first term. Everybody's still wrapping up in that era of prosperity. And then the Great Depression begins in the second term of Augustus O. Stanley, which means President 28, Franklin D. Roosevelt. This, him and Theodore Roosevelt being the other 2 men who were elected to 3rd terms but are never going to finish out those 3rd terms. Franklin D. Roosevelt has 3 different vice presidents here. His first being Alf Landon. First being Alf Landon. That's going to lead to the FDR-Landon fiscal warfare. They're going to be arguing back and forth. They agree on a lot of social things, but they're arguing back and forth. What do we do with this Great Depression? Alf Landon will eventually leave that ticket in the 36 election to primary FDR. FDR is going to choose George W. Norris, who will be with him until 1941. We're going to get out of the Great Depression in that time. And then Cordell Hull is going to join the ticket with FDR after George W. Norris decides to retire. And then the Nazis are going to bomb Puerto Rico. That's right, the Nazis. Germany gets us into World War II, not Japan. We're going to bomb Puerto Rico. The USA is going to enter World War II, and FDR is assassinated during Operation Long Jump. This was a plan in the real timeline, but it is a successful assassination attempt in this timeline, which means Cordell Hull is going to take over as the president. He's going to choose General Dwight Eisenhower as his vice president. Major events here: the Battle of Boston Harbor. So the German naval ships are going to come to the United States, bring World War II to the U.S. in this timeline, and because of that, we're going to suspend the 1944 election. However, under President Hull, we're going to capture Adolf Hitler. He's going to be put on trial. He will be executed. We'll get the end of World War II, and the Cuban conflict is going to begin. So that Cuban conflict is going to stick with us for a little bit. 30th President Dwight Eisenhower. He's going to serve 2 terms with us. Vice President Chan Gurney at his side. And it is going to be in this time as well. I don't have it listed on here. It's going to be in this time as well that we're going to get term limits. We're going to get term limits not only on the president, which is going to be set for 2 terms, but it will be set on Congress as well. Now, the House of Senators, every single one of them are up for re-election when the presidential election happens. Now, in those mid-years, what we would know as the midterm election years, that's when every single governor in the House of Governors is up for re-election. So 4-year terms for both the House of Senators and the House of Governors, but they are going to have 5-term limits, so each one can serve 20 years in each house. Major events here: the Senate Expansion Act. So this is going to take place starting in 1952. 1952. The Senate will expand from 5 senators to 7 senators per state, and by 1960 we'll have 10 senators per state, and that's something that the current administration in this timeline is dealing with as well. The interstate system is established, the USA space program is established, but we're getting Russian tension out of that. No surprise there, the Russians want to go to space too. 31, Estes Kefauver. He is going to serve, it looks like there, exactly 1 term, but we're going to find out. He was elected to a 2nd. Vice President John F. Kennedy is going to be with him. Hawaii is going to be admitted to the Union here. Hawaii is going to be admitted to the Union under Kefauver. We're going to get voting reform as well. Lots of things changing with voting, especially when it comes to how we vote for the president itself. And he is assassinated during his 2nd inauguration. It's the only televised presidential death. That's right. Estes Kefauver delivering his 2nd inaugural address on television and is killed by a Cuban assassin. So President John F. Kennedy now, former vice president, he's going to choose Hubert Humphrey as his vice president. So we're going to be bombing Cuban naval ships off the south coast of Florida, and then we're going to get the Havana embarrassment. So you thought Bay of Pigs was bad. Wait until you find out about the Havana embarrassment. He's only going to serve 1 term because 33, we got Matthew Ridgway. That's right. General Matthew Ridgway is going to come in. He's only going to serve 1 term, but that's all he wants. He runs as a Republican, takes on President Kennedy, defeats him with Creighton Abrams by his side. Major events here. We're getting the Cuban surrender, but that's because we're going to drop General Hellfire. So General Hellfire is going to be a 500 kiloton hydrogen bomb. We're going to drop it on Havana, Cuba. Literally erase that embarrassment off the map. So 34, we're getting Richard Nixon. We're getting Tricky Dick in this timeline, but he's only serving one term for those first couple years. Margaret Chase Smith is going to be his vice president. Nixon trying to appeal um, to a broader audience here by choosing the first woman vice president, the first female vice president. Margaret Chase Smith is going to leave because of those Nixon racist tapes you see under major events there. Barry Goldwater will finish out the term as the vice president, but we're going to establish OSHA. Richard Nixon also wants to establish the United States as a military superpower, and we're going to do that by capturing Fidel Castro as well. 35, that's right, Martin Luther King Jr. and Vice President Walter Mondale is going to serve one term. So yes, MLK Jr. is still alive in this timeline. In fact, Dr. King, not in the amount of danger that he is in the normal timeline. That's because of how quickly civil rights moves and how much earlier it happens. And we can have a debate all day long about, that would never happen this way, that would never happen this thing. That's the fun of alternate history. It's historical fiction. But Dr. King is going to be president from 73 to 77. Major events, the Fair Hiring and Labor Act, we're going to continue pushing civil rights, expanding them out. The African American Alliance, this is not saying like an alliance of African Americans in the United States. This is an alliance between the continent of Africa and the North American continent. He is going to establish that. He's also going to establish the World Trade Organization. That's going to be bred out of the African American Alliance as well. But then we're going to get Nelson Rockefeller. We're going to get Nelson Rockefeller with Vice President John Chafee. So President Rockefeller is going to establish that 8-hour workday. We're going to get the Rockefeller trials because there is a lot of rumor that's going around and some evidence to back it up as well that maybe President Rockefeller wasn't elected as democratically as people may think, but he is going to have a heart attack and die on his natural death date of January 26, 1979, which means John Chafee is going to be taking over as president for the rest of that term with Steve Sims by his side. We're going to get the completion of the Rockefeller trials. Was Chafee in the know of what happened? But he does yield the nickname No Faith Chafe for the 1980 election. In fact, he's going to be primaried in the 1980 election. He's going to lose that primary to Ronald Reagan, who's going to serve a full 2 terms. Jesse Helms is going to be the vice president by Reagan's side because the moral majority in the God First movement is going to take over. Now, that's a hair controversial, especially with how hard in that they are going on it and how hard they're running on it. But when we capture Saddam Hussein in the 80s, it solidifies Reagan for a second term. He is going to also deal with the AIDS crisis. But when it comes to the AIDS crisis, we're going to see a lot more movement from our next president, a young Joe Biden, who's going to serve from 89 to 97. He's getting the full 2 terms here. Paul Tsongas is going to be the vice president. We're going to get health care reform under Joe Biden. This is going to be really focused on helping the HIV/AIDS crisis as well as an urban renewal act. And we'll break all that down in the Biden episode. Number 40, there's going to be Mario Cuomo. 4 years under Mario Cuomo, Vice President Bill Clinton by his side. Affordable Housing Act is going to tack on to that Urban Renewal Act. And then here's the interesting one because I had to include it. I didn't put it in my rules, and I toyed with, do I have 9/11 happen or no? And I think yes. I think that it is just like World War I and World War II, it is so important in history, I think, that a 9/11 happens in every timeline. So the catalyst for this is going to be Mario Cuomo blocks Saudi Arabia from the World Trade Organization. Moving to 41, John McCain. As you can see, the September 11 attacks happen here. His Vice President Dick Cheney, John McCain does pass away on September 11th, 2001. In this timeline, there are 4 planes. 2 are flown into the World Trade Center, the North and South Tower. 1 is flown into the military headquarters in Arlington, Virginia. And the other one is flown into the president's mansion in Pennsylvania. Instead of hitting an open field in Pennsylvania, it hits the president's mansion where John McCain is. It does kill President McCain. Dick Cheney is in Wyoming. He's back home in Wyoming when this happens. and he ascends to the presidency, and he chooses Colin Powell as his vice president. He's going to serve until 2009. We're getting the Middle Eastern War. It's not the Iraq War. Saudi Arabia is the target here. We also get the Department of Civilian Surveillance. It's not called the Department of Homeland Security. It's the Department of Civilian Surveillance. And that's going to be something that the current administration is also dealing with. What is the legality of this? Because there's nothing saying we can't do it. He also completes the rebuild of the president's mansion by the end of his term as well. Sherrod Brown's coming in next after those 2 terms. He's going to have Vice President John Lewis. Dick Cheney's going to be the last man in this timeline to serve 2 full terms. And it's not even technically full terms because he wasn't president for the first 9 months, 8 or 9 months of the presidency. But Sherrod Brown, he's going to be a 1-termer here. Vice President John Lewis. Now, they're calling it the Share the Wealth Bill, but because it was Sherrod Brown, it became the Sherrod the Wealth Bill. What this did was tax the rich and increase the taxes on the rich and corporations. The issue with the Sherrod the Wealth Bill, and this is going to be part of why he's a 1-term president, is that it went into effect too quickly. There was no gradualization of this, and it does cause a great recession. However, the legalization of gay marriage does happen under President Brown. Then we get Mitt Romney. He's going to serve as president for 4 years. Rand Paul going to be his vice president. We're going to get spending cuts and tax breaks. This is going to be in an attempt to re-stimulate the economy. We're also going to get Romney Care. This is going to be teetering on a universal health care. But this is going to be testing the waters along the lines of what we got with Obamacare in the real timeline. But we're going to get Romney Care and the Russo-Iran hostage crisis. So we're going to have a hostage crisis here, and it's going to cause friction between Rand Paul and Mitt Romney, which is part of why there is no re-election in 2016. Instead, we're getting Barack Obama, 1-term president in this timeline. Vice President Michael Bennet from Colorado. He's going to be called Bipartisan Barack, and that's because he is going to run on, I want to work with Republicans and Democrats. It's clear that there's infighting on both sides. I want to reunite us. So Barack Obama's not going to run on hope and change like he did in the real timeline. He's going to run on reuniting in this timeline. We're going to get pharma reform. We're going to be bringing some drug prices down. We are going to expand Romney Care. But those last 2 bullet points, they're going to be part of why he does not get reelected in 2020. We've got the George Floyd protests and how President Obama responds to that, as well as how President Obama responds to COVID. Now, in this timeline, we do have the rise of Donald Trump, who in 2018 gets elected to the governor of Florida solely so he can run for president. He is going to be a 1-term president here. Bill Lee of Tennessee is going to be his president until 2023, and then it's going to be Marco Rubio, a senator from Florida. This is going to be America first. He is going to be focused on we are number 1. We're going to get the Corona riots, vote tampering investigations, and then he's going to fire his own vice president. Bill Lee will be fired. And there's going to be a lot of question of, can he do this? Can you fire the vice president? And so Bill Lee's going to get fired. He's going to replace him with Marco Rubio. The president's mansion gets a huge upgrade under President Trump. And Trump, in an interview, calls it the president's kingdom, which is going to put a sour taste in some people's mouth, as well as troops in Palestine. So yes, Donald Trump will lose his re-election bid in 2024, which brings us to the current administration, the 47th president. That's going to be Bernie Sanders. That's going to be Bernie Sanders with his vice president, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The interesting thing here is Bernie Sanders is the oldest serving president, the president who's the oldest during their time in office, while Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is the youngest serving vice president. I have listed all that out. We'll go through ages and all that fun stuff as we hit each different episode. Major events here. We've got the Bernie bills. I can't wait to break those down for you. Some of those Some people are going to be really upset about those. Some people are going to be like, my heart, I can't, I wish this was the timeline. We're going to get the Trump trials, which are ongoing. The Proportional Senate Act is also ongoing, where President Sanders argues, why should Rhode Island have 10 senators and California have 10 senators? It should be proportional to the amount of people that live in those states, similar to the normal House of Representatives. And then the Middle Eastern exit, that's an ongoing plan as well. But we're going to have a lot of fun with this. Like I said, if you enjoy this, I really appreciate it. Welcome along for the ride. I'm going to be bringing out episodes. We're going to break down everything. But this is ultimately for me to get my mind straight. So if you hate it, congratulations. I'm not trying to start political debates. I am just trying to come up with a alternate history story unlike any other. So thank you guys, and I'll see you in the next one.